Hello everybody, this is Mr. Johnson, and we are going to be going through the rest of the notes here for the first section of our samples chapter. Yesterday we finished up the activity about sampling some different rectangles from that page, and so we're going to be talking about how to go through different styles of sampling. Some are good, some are bad, and then how to run a simulation of a sample at the end of our notes. So yesterday we should have probably left off on one of these middle pages. One of my classes got a little bit further, so if this is a review for you, then you can kind of just chill for another minute. Starting off, one thing to keep in mind, most national polls, if you are looking in the newspapers or in articles or in magazines, they're going to interview a certain number of people. Usually a good range will be somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 total. And that provides accurate results. Usually it's a good cross-section of demographics, races, sex, religions, financial situations, how much money you would make. So it's a good picture of America. Samples that are larger than that, actually, they get you better data. It's closer to the truth, but it's only just a little bit better. So they do the least amount of work for the best picture possible, and that'll be anywhere between 1,000 and 1,500 people. Question 11 here says, often polls and surveys report their findings while also mentioning a margin of error. So what does that margin of error mean? Well, a lot of times the results could be wrong, but just by a little bit. That's your hope. You want to be as close as possible to the truth. So the margin of error gives you a little bit of a cushion. Usually when we do this, we do a plus or a minus sign. So we might give a number like we expect people to be 7 years old, plus or minus half a year. And that'll give us a little bit of a cushion, saying that we could be between 6.5 years, because that's what 7 minus 0.5 is, and we could be between 7.5 years. So that would be 6.5 to 7.5 is our cushion that we should expect. Now that margin of error, half a year is pretty big. That would not be a good margin of error, and we'll talk about that later on. Question 12, several key details that might impact survey responses and the data that you would collect could be things like how the question is phrased. Who is asking the question? If a certain political party is asking, you might be tempted to give them an answer that they would want to hear. Or if your teacher is asking you, you might want to give an answer that they would want to hear. So who is asking is important. How the question is asked, if someone yells at you or it has a certain demeanor, that could influence how you respond. The instructions given beforehand play a big role in how people respond. The vocabulary that is used, that is actually one that standardized tests have to be very, very careful about, because certain groups of people might not have the same word choice as other groups of people, and you want it to be fair for everyone. There are lots of factors that could impact data and data collection. Moving on, the design of a statistical study is called biased if it systematically favors certain outcomes. We do not want our samples or surveys or anything to be biased. We want it to be equal and proportionate to what is true and accurate for our population. Down below that, there are 3 different types of samples. The first one, called a voluntary response sample, it chooses by just responding to a general appeal. So people would write in or call in for polls, and they would give their opinion, basically. A lot of times these types of polls overstate strong feelings. So if you're very passionate or opinionated about something, your voice will be heard, but the voices of people who don't care as much, those people will not be heard. You see this a lot on radio shows or even online. If people go out and take a poll online, it's because they are interested in it in the first place. Now, voluntary response samples, they're not a good choice because they are biased. You're not getting everyone's opinion. It's not an accurate reflection. The second style of sampling is called a convenience sample, and that is just drawing from people or a group that would be convenient to us. A lot of times these groups are close in proximity, so if I wanted to go out and ask the businesses or figure something out about the businesses in Jacksonville, I could go to the square and just ask all the businesses on the square. That would be convenient. They're all in the same spot. But it might not be accurate because you're missing out Walmart, County Market, Home Depot, businesses on the north side of town. So it's not really the best way to do that. If I wanted to sample all of JHS, but I only asked one of my classes, that would be convenient for me because they're all in the same spot, but it would not be truly representative of Jacksonville High School in total. The last one is called a simple random sample. A lot of times that will be abbreviated as SRS, and that's just selecting a certain amount of people, a certain amount of individuals from the population, where everybody has the same chance of being selected. So people could get selected twice, multiple times, maybe even 3 times, but the odds of getting chosen are the same every single time. And a lot of times it's going to be random, and we're going to use a calculator or a computer, or we're going to be learning how to use a table of random digits to do this manually. If everybody used their calculators for homework and tests, I wouldn't really know what numbers you're using, so this gives us a way to kind of standardize what random digits people will be selecting, so we all get the same answer, essentially. So that's something we'll talk about here at the end of the notes. At the bottom, question number 13, comparing and contrasting the 3 different types. So I have voluntary response samples, I have convenience samples, and simple random samples. If I look, sometimes they can overlap, sometimes they have things in common, other times they might not have much in common. So between the 3 voluntary response samples, those would be where people call in because they're very opinionated about the topic. That is unique to a voluntary response sample. On the other hand, over here, convenience samples, they collect data that is easy to get to. It's convenient. Now, both of those are biased. So up here in the intersection point between convenience samples and voluntary response samples, they share that trait. The third type here is the simple random sample. That is the best option. It's unbiased. It's where you select people that are determined by something we might not have control of. Calculator, computer, random list of digits. And so that's the best way. It's not biased. Now all of these are sampling techniques, so in the middle they're all different ways that you could sample. I'm still kind of thinking about maybe what simple random samples and convenience samples might have in common. You might be able to combine them a little bit. I would have to think about that. You might have to do 2 stages when you're sampling. And then the last one here, between voluntary response samples and simple random samples, I really don't know how they might be related. So I just put question marks in those spots. Feel free to pause the video if I'm going too fast or if you need to write something down. That is one of the big benefits for having something recorded. You could even watch the video again if you needed it. The next page in the notes kind of goes through a couple of examples identifying a situation as one of those 3. So number 14, when Shaquille O'Neal played for the Orlando Magic, the Orlando Sentinel published a poll, and anyone could call in to vote. And it showed that more than 90% of the respondents thought that the Magic should refuse the offer that Shaq was demanding, so he wanted more money. And so Shaquille O'Neal kind of got the idea that he wasn't wanted in Orlando, and so he moved to the Los Angeles Lakers. And if you know anything about basketball, the Lakers went on kind of a streak for a while, and they won several championships. Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal together, they did pretty well. So what type of survey does this article reference? Well, that would be a voluntary response sample. Anyone could call in and vote. Now that's biased because only extremely passionate individuals took the time to respond, and they took the trouble to respond. A lot of times those opinions are negative. They're kind of pessimistic. Number 15, kind of looking at if the penny makes sense. In April 2009, an issue of Parade magazine included the article about how much it costs to actually make a penny. So the italic part is a brief excerpt. 1 cent doesn't buy you very much these days, not even the metal that's contained in a penny. A penny consists of 97.5% zinc and only 2.5% copper. So if you think a penny is copper, it's not really that much copper. Last year, it cost the U.S. Mint nearly 1.5 cents to create 1 penny and nearly 9 cents to make a nickel. So for every new penny and nickel that they issue, They increased the national debt by almost as much as that coin is worth itself. So at the end of the article, the readers were asked, should the U.S. get rid of the penny entirely, just stop making it? And they were encouraged to vote online at parade.com. So accessing the results later on, we see that 57% of those who responded said that we should eliminate the penny. Can we trust those results? Why or why not? I'm not sure if we can really trust them. It's a voluntary response sample, which is kind of something that's not good. It's biased. Only opinionated people probably went through the hassle to go online, to vote, so we're probably not getting an accurate representation of all Americans and what all Americans think. Also, you have to think about who's getting the magazine. Not everyone reads Parade magazine, so we're only drawing from a certain select group. Maybe it's included in the paper, and only people who have extra money order the paper, or people who are older, who are used to reading the paper, would respond to those types of things. So demographically, we have to be kind of concerned about who's getting our poll, and then the people who are responding might be very opinionated. Now, at the bottom it says, in 2006, Gallup ran a poll of 1,002 individuals who were selected randomly, so U.S. adults. 43% of them said that we should do away with the penny. Now, what might have caused the differences in those results? Well, a couple things that they did well. They sampled an appropriate number of people. So 1,002 is kind of in that great range of asking enough people to get good quality, accurate results. The other thing that it did well is that it was a simple random sample. So the results are probably more accurate than the online poll that Parade magazine did. The other thing that we'll continue to talk about is Gallup. Gallup is one of the few professional companies that goes around and collects data. So they specialize in that process, and they run all sorts of polls and find information for different companies or different groups or different people. So I think I would trust those results overall a little bit more than the Parade magazine results. So how can we do a simple random sample if on our calculators we won't all be getting the same numbers because they're random? How can we maybe do a simple random sample where we would get similar results so that I can check your work? Well, that process actually comes from using a table of random digits. 2 steps using a table of random digits. The first step is that you need to label. You're going to assign an appropriate identifying number to each individual in your population. So I might get the number 1. My next door neighbor might get the number 2. And then the neighbor next door to them would get the number 3. And so you go through and you label everyone. And you have to make sure that they have the same number of digits total. So if I start to go over 10 and I have 20 different houses, everybody needs to have 2 digits. So 01 would be my number, 02 would be my neighbor, 03 would be my neighbor's neighbor, and then once I get into the 10s and 11s, those have 2 digits naturally. The second step is to use the random digit table to select individuals. So if I get 15 out of my table, then I would choose the 15th house. If I got 01, then my house would be chosen. The first example has a population of 57 people. Now 57, you have to know that that is 2 digits because that is going to be super important for what we're doing. As I'm labeling these people, I'm going to start at 01, which has 2 digits. That stands for 1. And I'm going to go all the way up to 57. So everybody would get their own unique identifying number. Now your table is going to have a long string, and they're kind of separated into clumps just to make it a little easier to read. My clumps need to be 2 digits long since I have a population that's 57. So I would split it up kind of like this. 19 and then 22 because those are 2 digits each. And then I have to skip over here. 3 and 9 make 39. 50. 34 is the next 2-digit number. 05 would be 5. 75, 6 with a 2, 8, 7, 1, 3, and I would keep on going. Now, if I am selecting people, you have to think about who you can select. So I can only go up to 57. So that means I would choose 19. That's okay. 22 is okay. 39 even okay because they're all less than 57. That's my max. 50 is perfectly fine. 34 is. 5 is. But if I get to 75, that is not a number I can choose because there are not 75 individuals. 62, another number I can't use. 87 is a no-go. I would get to 13, and 13 is another number I could use. So depending on how many people I need to sample, if I needed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people in my sample, I have my 7 people right there. If I need 10 people, I continue until I've circled 10 numbers. So what about if my population is 199 people? Well, that is 3 digits. So I'm going to go 0, 0, 1 all the way through 199. So 1, 2, 3, but 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 2, 0, 0, 3. So splitting that up, I'm going to have to count 3 numbers and draw my split line. 3 numbers, draw my split line, and I just keep on going. And this one's going to be a little harder because I can only go up to 199. So 192 just barely makes the cut. 239 does not. 503 does not. 405 does not. 756 would not. 287 would not as well. Now the next one, I don't know what that third digit will be, but 130 something, that would be a good number. Okay, so you can kind of see how that process might be a little bit more difficult the more digits I have. So depending on your situation, it can be hard to get qualifying numbers. The example for a population of 5 people, that is a 1-digit number. So I'm going to split my list into literal 1-digit pieces. So every single digit is its own choice. So really kind of crowded down there. Now I can only go from 1 to 5. So 1 works, 9 does not. 2 works, 2 works, and they're drawn again. That can happen. 3 would work, 9 would not work, 5 would work. 5 is the last person on my list. Now 0 is kind of unique. I did not label anyone as 0, so I cannot choose 0. But I could choose 3, I could choose 4 if I kept on going. So you have to know when to exclude numbers. That's really important. The last one here, your population is 6,734 people. That is 4 digits. And so we're going to have to split our list into chunks of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. Circling the people that would work, I can go up to that amount. So I've essentially gone 0, 0, 1 all the way through 6,734. So this number works. This number also works because it's in the 3,000s. I believe that number works because that's a 3. 7,562 does not work. That is over the limit, and the last one is over the limit as well. Now, if you are not restricted and you don't have to get the same answer as someone else, using your calculator is the easiest way to go. That's something that we've done quite a bit recently with the Beyonce project and then also with the random rectangles activity. If you look at the next page, the things that are following on the notes are not really that important. They're not going to be on a test or on homework or anything like that, or a quiz. But there are interesting resources and articles about things that have happened in the past that deal with sampling. So usually sampling and polls and surveys come up around election time, and so these are all real, true stories that have happened. I remember, if you look at the next page, when Florida had to recount because George W. Bush and Al Gore were running, and it came down to Florida, and whoever won Florida was going to win the overall election. And they were having trouble with their ballots having defects on them, and so they weren't getting counted properly. And so they recounted, and it was like that for a week, and it was big news. So if you want to read that and learn a little bit more about sampling and being able to predict the results, that's kind of a good little article. In the most recent election between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, Gallup had predicted Hillary Clinton would win by quite a bit, and it turned out that she did not win. It was very surprising, and so they had to figure out where they went wrong. And so these are 4 different things they kind of found that they needed to improve on because their results were not accurate predictions. If you look at the bottom, you can see how the map turned out in the end. So some of these states are not the same color, like Michigan, not the same color, Wisconsin, not the same color, even down here, Florida. And so those are some of the key states that actually pushed over Trump to get the Electoral College majority. So misidentification of likely voters, who was going to vote. A lot of people ended up not voting, and that changes the results. Underrepresentation of regions, so certain regions of people were underrepresented in their surveys. Faulty representation of race and ethnicity, that had a big thing to do with it. And then non-standard sampling methods. A lot of times they use phone numbers, and one of the things with phone numbers is that people do not have a landline anymore. And so that's something that they're trying to deal with and work around. Last page on your notes is just about the election between Barack Obama and Mitt Romney. A similar situation kind of happened there. It wasn't as extreme as the Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton election, but it was still something that they had to go back and kind of look at and learn from. Overall, you guys should have enough information and knowledge to work on the homework. That starts on page 129. One thing that you're going to see before you get there is that table of random digits. So it starts at line 101, it goes all the way to the back to line 200. A lot of times they'll tell you to start at a certain line. If they don't tell you, you just point your finger somewhere in the middle, and you'll start at that line, and you'll just look at those chunks and split them up appropriately. With the rest of the class, work on that homework in small groups or by yourself. Tomorrow will be a work day as well. Next week we'll probably practice and then take a quiz the day after that. We'll see you guys soon. Thanks for watching.